You're listening to the AfterBuzz TV Network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Gene Johnson.
From the AfterBuzz Studios in Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies, this is AfterBuzz TV's UFC After Show. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show. It's AfterBuzz TV's UFC After Show.
Hello and welcome to a special UFC AfterBuzz. Tonight, not only will George be popping in my frame, but we will be discussing UFC Fight Night San Jose, Robbie Lawler versus Matt Brown, a super exciting 5-round bout. Probably one of the most exciting non-title 5-round fights we've seen in a while. We were talking about that earlier. But we are joined by an extra special guest. We are here with yours truly, Art Davie. For those of you watching the show that don't know who Art Davie is, you need to do your homework. Art Davie was the creator of UFC 1. Not of MMA, but of UFC 1, the league that started all of this
Literally,
that we are talking about today.
why we're here, right?
Why we're here right now. We would not be on UFC AfterBuzz TV if Art Davie did not create.
There would be no UFC.
There would be no UFC.
There it is from the peanut gallery.
We are going to give him a much more in-depth introduction later and get into his story and how it all started. But first, we got to do a little breakdown of the fights.
Yeah.
Art, did you watch the fights?
I did not get a chance to see the Lawler Brown one. But I understand I missed a great one.
You did. Yeah. You did. It was a very competitive fight. Obviously, two tremendous athletes.
That's one worth checking out.
Definitely.
They'll be replaying it, of course, the next couple of weeks. Yeah, that one was a lot of fun. Go through the
we're going to go through the fight card to the results. We're going to start with Patrick Cummins and Kyle Kingsbury. Ended in unanimous decision. Then we had 155, Jorge Masvidal and Darren Crookshank. There was a little debate in the trailer how to say this one, but we settled on Crookshank. Unanimous decision as well. Then we have Bobby Green and Josh Thompson. We were talking about this one last week. I actually made a statement that I would like to announce. I said that I thought Josh Thompson was going to win. Bobby Green.
I thought Josh Thompson was going to win too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we both said that last week.
Split decision. So did somebody else, obviously.
Yeah, it was a split decision.
It was a very worthwhile match.
Super exciting match. Bobby Green, awesome guy. I think he's a SoCal native. Our last guest, Alan Jaban, was talking about him. And giving him much praise of how good of a fighter he was.
The young Turks, coming into the UFC and making their own mark.
Definitely. Josh Thompson, obviously a ferocious fighter, a guy that goes out there and is always energetic. We said this in the trailer, they both kept moving forward. There was never a dull moment. No one ever laid back on their heels. It was just constant forward movement.
I like Bobby Green's cockiness. If you notice, every time Josh Thompson would get him a fight, he's like, "Yeah, just bring it, keep bringing it, keep bringing." I think it kind of got in Josh Thompson's head, though. I think
it was a mental
he's like,
thing.
"Yeah, my punches aren't afflicting him," so I think it kind of threw him off a little bit. Maybe it kind of did affect the way that he fought.
Okay.
By the way, I'm George Hermosa. I don't know if I don't remember if we got introduced.
I was so excited.
And this is JT.
If you haven't figured it out by now, folks, the train has left the building here.
You don't watch our show. If you didn't know that this is George Hermosa, this is Jay Tan.
But what does it matter? Because they're watching it now, and if there's a show that you want to watch, it's this one with our guest, the godfather of the UFC, Art Davie, whose book, by the way, Is This Legal?, is available right now on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, wherever there is a Barnes & Noble, and AscendBooks.com. Go get it.
If that isn't a good PR person.
Yeah. Well,
it's on iTunes as well.
We should try and put it on there,
Really?
hopefully.
It's on iTunes.
You can listen to your book on iTunes?
Or maybe read it.
It's also on Looney Tunes.
And it's Bugs Bunny reading it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
hilarious.
That would be awesome. Then we had Dennis Bermudez and Clay Guida that ended in round 2 of rear naked choke.
Yeah, you talk about, we were just talking about Josh Thompson as a guy that always brings it and full of energy. Clay Guida is in that set as well.
Yeah.
Both of them had stellar, Josh specifically, a stellar career in Strikeforce, and Clay had several matches in there as well.
Both those guys former Strikeforce lightweight champions too. I think
Clay?
I think Guida beat Josh Thompson for the title.
Okay, I'm missing that part of my history. I honestly didn't remember he was Strikeforce champion or not.
God bless you,
Mud
Wikipedia.
on my face.
Yeah. As he has it in front of him.
I mean, you know.
Clay Guida, typical fashion, his hair down.
And his hands going.
And his hands flowing,
Yep.
exactly what I was going to say. It was aggressive, but I think we were talking about earlier, he isn't the Clay Guida that we may have seen a couple years back.
Yeah. We may have seen Clay peak. You know, he's always known. I'd say he's even a cult status figure in MMA as a guy like Diego Sanchez that will always bring it, and if he's on the card, you don't want to miss that match.
Right.
But in this one, he for not aggressive for Clay Guida, or maybe not as fast or on point for Clay himself, but and of course Dennis took the fight to him, and Dennis is again another one of these young upstarts that has been around for quite a while. He's had a good career in the UFC, but really I think is hitting his stride. This was his 7th win in a row, and he caught Clay. Got him down to the ground and caught Clay in a rear naked choke with a body lock, to accentuate it. And was
Joe
able to
Rogan
finish
said
him.
said it best. This is probably his biggest win yet. Bermudez. He's on his rise, obviously going against an OG, so to speak, like Clay Guida is obviously a big mark in your record.
Yeah.
I think he said in the post fight he wanted to fight one of the top 5, possibly a title shot. I don't think a title shot's underway just yet, but definitely a top 5, top 10 competitor. Yeah,
Clay Guida gets you into that conversation, but doesn't make you kind of the lead point of that conversation.
Right. I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, Aldo's kind of been on top of that division for a little bit, so I'd say not so much a title shot, but give him a guy who's at least fought for the title. Maybe somebody like a Ricardo Lamas or a Chang Sun-Young Korean Zombie. I know he came off that separated shoulder against Aldo like about a year ago, so if he's ready to fight, I'd say put him up against Bermudez. Yeah,
we're going to be hearing a lot more of his name going forward here.
It was definitely a deciding match. Then we had Anthony Rumble Johnson and Antonio Rogero Nogueira.
Yep, Little Nog.
Little Nog.
And then, again, another name that we will be starting to hear about in the light heavyweight title conversation.
Definitely. It was TKO victory in round 1.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah. Rumble just came out, looked fantastic, and, Little Nog, for the legacy that he has, his career is one half of the Nogueira brothers and their career and all the matches they've had, and highlights in MMA history.
Right.
This wasn't the night. This was not adding to it.
No, I was counting the uppercuts and right hooks. It was uppercut, right hook, uppercut, right hook, uppercut, right hook.
Rumble pushed him against the cage and just landed those shots, and Nogueira went down, unfortunately.
Rumble's always, I think he's always been a top guy, just with the weight. I mean, he's always either missed weight or, I think he fought at welterweight. He's just fought as low as welterweight and as high as heavyweight. He's actually holds a victory over Andrei Arlovsky. I know probably Art's probably familiar with a little bit more of the Arlovsky, guys like Couture. Yeah, exactly.
Fang.
Yeah, the famous fanged mouthpiece, of course.
Yes.
Was he one of the first for me at least, one of the first ones that I remember having that kind of mouth guard. Does it go back farther? I mean, in your days?
No, actually, I think he was the first.
Was he?
Yeah.
I remember that took me, kind of caught my attention there and said, okay, let's watch for this guy.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the main, though, what did you think about the undercard? Anything stick out? You said you saw everything except the main event, though?
You mean...
last night?
No. Last night I was totally away. I was completely away from civilization.
See, when you got your legacy, step away from the sport. We're still in the trenches and got to stay here.
He just built it,
Yeah.
Now he can do whatever he wants.
He looked at it and said, that's pretty good. On to the next one.
Actually, I was someplace where I did notice that John McCarthy was reffing last night.
Yeah.
And, of course, he was reffing the night before Bellator.
Right. Yeah.
He's got to be the hardest working man in show business.
I think Friday they were in Temecula, and then yesterday they were in San Jose.
Yeah. I followed them on Twitter and Facebook, and I saw that Elaine, John McCarthy's wife, said that they drove literally straight from the Bellator event to the UFC event.
That was after we had dinner with them. And they got up and we all left, went our separate ways. They got in a car. I remember this was probably at about 1 a.m. Saturday. They got in a car and drove from Temecula up to San Jose.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So you were at dinner at them moments before They took that drive, and then we saw him on TV a couple hours later.
You know that Elaine did all the driving on that.
Absolutely.
John's like, I'm sleeping.
Yeah. And I noticed that John didn't drink at all when he was with us. And I said to him, he said, no, he said, I'm working. He said, this is a working weekend.
It's a
That's
write
a good
off.
point. Yeah.
That's a write-off.
Elaine, for that car ride, another 5-gallon tub of ice cream coming for you. And that Zim Zam thing you keep talking about. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, real quick. Do you think Nogueira's pretty much done? You think he should fight anymore? Or?
You know what? I think, at least based off of that one, that it's probably worth considering. Unless you're talking about something, the equivalent of, for example, Arlovsky. I know we're talking different weight classes, but I remember when Arlovsky fought Brendan Schaub a couple of shows ago, we talked about how, to me, I would have liked to see Arlovsky versus Big Nog. It's many years delayed, but at one point, guys, Andrei Arlovsky was the UFC heavyweight champion, and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, was a champion in Pride, and there was that era, Pride in Japan, if nobody else, if you're new to it, but that they tried many years to put together Pride versus UFC matches, and it really never happened until a lot of guys would come from Pride would sign with the UFC, and so you saw Vanderlei Silva versus Chuck Liddell, Mirko Cro Cop in the UFC with a bunch of different guys. But this is a little bit past the prime, past the point that its heyday. But Arlovsky versus Big Nog, would be something fun to see. And by the same token, that level of fighter, from yesteryear, really.
Right.
If there's somebody in the light heavyweight division, at that level, that would make sense for Little Nog, maybe. But I think that's probably about it.
I feel that Little Nog has some fight left in him. I think he can still compete. But he has to decide what kind of fighter he wants to be. We were talking about this earlier, and it's a great point that you made. Am I a guy that's in there, fighting tooth and nail to get that title shot? And that's the only goal I have in the UFC. But there's also fighters in the UFC, I mean, guys that we've met and talked to even, that are later in their years, have already had those shots and are content with still being a competitor.
And they're looking to do it for the challenge.
At the same time, though, it is a living too. So this is how they live. This is their job,
right?
So it's like, how else are they going to make money? Not that they can't, but maybe that's their mentality as well, where they really don't have much more options but to fight. You know.
I don't think that's the case for Little Nog. I mean, their name and their gyms are so established enough.
I agree.
That's true. But maybe not the top, 10, top 5 competitors for Little Nog right now, but he can still compete actively in his division. I think there's guys that are definitely still
up
for him.
Against Shogun. If you ever got a chance, go to UFC.tv Fight Pass. Look up the Pride stuff. Shogun versus Little Nog.
Yeah,
that fight was awesome.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
I kind of want to see him again.
Okay, our main event: Robbie Lawler versus Matt Brown. It went the full 5 rounds. It went the distance. It was scored 49-46, 49-46, 48-47.
Yeah.
We had a little debate about this earlier while we were watching it.
First, this was, as we said, one of the best matches, certainly the best 5-round match we've seen in a long time.
Non-title shot, yeah.
Yeah, non-title, maybe even title matches, very competitive. Both guys going back and forth, mixing it up really well with kicks and shots to the body, to the head. Robbie Lawler, of course, known for his heavy hands and avoiding the ground. Matt Brown has got quite, I don't know the number exactly, but submissions, got a big submission record in the UFC and has been on a big win streak recently. And this is, in a lot of ways, his coming out party, is a delayed coming out party, if you will, because he's otherwise been kind of touch and go for a lot of his UFC career. But this is, the crest of his momentum here, and they really delivered. This was not one of those matches that a lot of people were hyping up and it had all the elements on paper, but then didn't deliver. This thing delivered and then gave you a tip.
Absolutely.
And back and forth. A lot of Brown got Lawler to the ground a couple of times, and in speaking about the scores, the first time I watched it, I felt like it was straightforward Robbie. I gave Robbie all 5 rounds. But as we watched it the second time, it seemed much closer to me, and I'm not quite sure which round it was that Matt... It's very strange. I think Robbie still probably won all of those rounds, but Matt didn't necessarily lose any of those rounds. Matt looked great, and showed chin and heart. You know, he took Robbie's shots, the body kicks he was throwing, you know, didn't phase, well, if it did phase him, he came back, you know, and stood strong.
Right.
So
he's known for that, I think. He's always had perseverance in the cage, and he's always kept a good battle against some of the top competitors in that league. I did give around possibly 2 to Matt Brown, agreeing with the one judge.
which ones did you see, though?
Definitely the 5th.
Yeah.
Which we were arguing about a little bit, but I think it's a good debate. But I just saw more dominance overall in Matt Brown in the entire 5th round.
You felt like he came back?
Yeah,
harder.
he definitely had a comeback. He woke up in the 4th round. He was looking probably his worst round, in my opinion. He looked really tired, really winded, gassed, whatever was happening.
Yeah.
He went into his corner after the round, and when he came back, it was just a new light had come on. And the 5th round seemed to be his best round.
Yeah. He dug deep and really was swinging there.
He was so active. Like it wasn't just that he was counterpunching or that he was staying consistent with Lawler. It seemed that he was the progressor, and that Lawler was almost countering him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can tell that Lawler was winning on the scorecard, but Matt Brown, he just came out that 5th round. He just came out swinging. He was not going to give up. If he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out. But, I mean, that guy just does not give up. And I love that about Matt Brown.
Yeah.
I think even though he lost, I don't really think that he should really fall that much because he still put up a great fight against Lawler. I don't think it's one of those rare fights where there was really no loser. Just on paper. But, you know, people say moral victory, but I think it's so much more than just a moral victory. He really proved that he still belongs in one of the top 3, top 5 welterweights.
Absolutely.
He can hang with the best of them there. And Robbie mentioned that as well, that, you know, there were 2 champions in that cage there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think for sure, that Matt I don't think Matt's stock has dropped at all. But, you know, you figure out who you put him up with next, and you give him another top 10 or top 5 guy.
Definitely. I don't think he goes down from here.
I'd give him Tyrone Woodley, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Teammate of Robbie Lawler. That would be an interesting call. Robbie Lawler has had 3 fights in the last 4 months, I think is what they said.
What a crazy turnaround
That's
there.
insane.
Yeah, especially at the pro level.
Yeah, especially not even at the pro level, not even in the UFC, but in the top 10 like Robbie Lawler is. I mean, he is on a fast-moving locomotive.
He fought Hendricks. He fought, who am I thinking of? Jake Ellenberger. And now...
Rory McDonald.
Yeah.
He beat Rory McDonald every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Well, we've got certainly some more MMA coming up. A lot of shows.
Yeah.
UFC shows
next
coming up
weekend was
soon.
supposed to be our local show in Los Angeles. It got canceled due to, scheduling conflicts.
Scheduling the injury and the lack of another
Right. They couldn't fill it.
show.
So.
Yeah, lack of another main event. Yeah. So we get a break next weekend.
Yay! But we will be back the weekend after. But
No, we
let's
won't.
get
We're
to
gonna
our
be the
guest
week after
in the
that.
house. It's 2 weeks?
Yeah.
August
I think it's
16th.
Yeah.
We just can't wait to come back. We can't wait to be with you.
We can just
guys.
come and just maybe review UFC 1. I think we were talking about that.
I got an idea.
Oh.
Let's do that now.
I'll
And
look at
here's
that.
the guy for it.
With
Sitting
the
in the
guy
guest couch.
Who created it? Okay, guys, just a little intro. Art Davie is the guy the businessman, the inventor, the creator, who started UFC 1. He's, a guy from Brooklyn that came out west and found the right people, and over the course of a couple years, put together a show in Denver, Colorado, which was the first UFC.
November 12th, 1993.
Yep. It was at the point where these guys didn't know what type of gear the fighters were going to wear, what type of ring or cage or mat it was going to be played in or fought in. It was really one of the first big mixed martial art events, which is a common term to us now, but back then MMA really wasn't a term to throw around.
Then it didn't even exist.
It didn't even
Not
exist.
for years later.
Yep.
Right?
Art Davie really wanted to take different types of martial arts and put them in the cage together. You want to
Tell them about the Tecate thing. Start with that, Art.
Tecate?
I mean, we can be here for a couple of hours, but
Well, when I was actually looking for fighters,
right.
a lot of people who I called on thought I was casting for a film. They figured this was Kumite. This was,
Like Bloodsport
Enter
Part
the-
2 or something. Yeah.
Enter the Dragon Part 16, something. And, they were doubtful that what we were really doing was really having, a real event. So I think I bring that up to suggest that at the time, it was on everyone's mind that this type of thing could or should happen. And doing my research, I found out that a lot of people had been, attempting to do something along these lines for a number of years. Most of these things never worked. You got two guys together from different martial arts. They argued about two things: the money and the rules. As in, how much money you going to make and how much money am I going to make? And, you know, is it done on a mat? Does it have gloves? How long? The rounds, grappling, gi, no gi? You could never get two guys to agree. I said in the book, it's like actually getting two pit bulls to discuss the distribution of a steak. You know? So, you know, when I did my homework on this, I found that, you know, all the way back to the ancient Greek Olympics, there was such a thing. And if anybody is into MMA today, many of them know that, you know, that way back in the day that the Greeks were actually doing this with no biting and eye gouging. And
Pancration.
Pancration, exactly, Daria. And it actually became, within very few Olympics, the most popular sport other than horse racing on the Olympic program. So my own personal baptism was that I was training for the Golden Gloves back in the 60s before I went in the service. And a friend of mine showed up on the beach out in Hampton Bays, out on Long Island. And he was the local wrestling stud. Apparently he'd come in third or fourth in a state championship at 76 kilos. And we got talking on the beach about, just the three of us. We were goofing around. And make a long story short, we went up sparring, and the sparring turned into something real. But I wound up with a double leg takedown on my butt on the sand with this gorilla on top of me, and I'm going, what happened? Everything I had, you know, I was hooking off the jab, and nothing. I was on the ground. So that made an enormous impression on me. And when I was in the service, it was a topic that would come up. You know, guys would sit around the squad bay when I was in the Marines. Hey, you know, could Bruce Lee have beaten Muhammad Ali? You know, Chuck Norris versus, you know, Sugar Ray Robinson, all that business. So, you know, it was a constant source of discussion. A couple of pals of mine actually went to Bangkok and saw an Indian wrestler versus a Muay Thai kickboxer in a Bangkok nightclub.
Wow.
And the wrestler lost. Wow, we debated that. It was like a hot topic for a couple of days.
So now your theory that you thought you had figured out that maybe a wrestler could beat a boxer was then reversed.
It was reversed. So, you know, realizing that there was an enormous amount of heat behind this smoke, years later, I'm working in an ad agency, and my boss has a client, and the client imports Mexican beer. Tecate, Carta Blanca, Bohemia.
Yeah.
And at one point, my boss says to the category manager, I'm going to bring Art Davie in. He's loaded with ideas. Art will come up with something really big. I had nothing. He brought me into the meeting. I was sitting there and making notes and trying to act intelligent, asking questions. But actually, like when I left, I realized that way back in the day, Bill Caton, who later on became Mike Tyson's manager and later became a noted boxing historian, had instituted a program of old-time fights that he used to sell Vaseline hair tonic back in the late 40s and early 50s. I vaguely remember that show on WPIX in New York when I was a kid growing up, you know. So I literally decided that I was going to go do this with martial arts. And we went back and made this presentation. And I worked on it all through the fall of 1989. And by the spring, I think it was February, March, they looked at it and said, this is really interesting, but it's really dangerous. And I don't think we're going to be doing this. So, you know, all of a sudden I had this huge file. And in that file was an article that Pat Jordan had written about the Gracies in the September 1989 issue of Playboy magazine. Wow. It's called BAD, Bad. And it says that Rorion Gracie is the most dangerous man in the United States of America, and he lives in the South Bay suburb of Torrance, California. Well, just at that time, I was literally, my headhunter had gotten me a gig at a direct response ad agency in Torrance. I'm literally within walking distance of the Gracie Academy. Talk about serendipity.
Oh,
Right.
the irony.
Now, when I left the agency that had the Tecate beer account, I asked my boss if I could take that concept with him, the copy platform. He said, which one? Oh, yeah, take it. He's like, we're not going to do anything with that. He said, what was that again? It was 3 or 4 things we presented, and obviously that was one that didn't stick in his mind. But I literally had this whole file, and I had talked to Karen Turner, who was promoting kickboxing up in Colorado for Coors Beer. I talked to T-shirt Joe Koffenberg here in L.A., who was doing some things, but nobody was doing what I was suggesting. I was calling it the world's best fighter. That was my working title.
Right.
And I saw it as a 16-man tournament, and I saw it as a pay-per-view event. Because everybody at the time was saying, hey, man, if we could get 2 guys together, you know, we'll take them out at the beach, Redondo Beach, we'll film this, it'll be in Blockbuster. those brick and mortar video stores
Yeah,
back in the day.
Videotapes were big there, and
Right.
pay-per-view at the same time.
Definitely.
Made their mark with WWF and that.
And when I went over to the Torrance Library, because there was really no internet in those days, and I was doing my research, I literally read like 200 articles on pay-per-view, and it was only 22 million homes wired at the time. Today it's over 100 million. So I knew it was pay-per-view, number one. I knew it was a tournament. And at one point, I finally went over and knocked on the Gracie's door. I called them a couple of times, couldn't get a hold of Horian. Finally went over there. They were just putting the finishing touches on the new academy. Those boys had been teaching over at the garage in Redondo Beach. They had about 150 students. And it was Hickson, it was Hoyler, and it was Hoyce and Horian. And I left my business card, and a couple of weeks later, I finally got a call from Horian. And I'm trying to tell him about World's Best Fighter. And he says, have you ever been enrolled? I said, what? I said, well, he said, rolled. I said, no. He said, you got to come down and do this. He said, come on down. So I give you a free lesson. So I came in and rolled with him, and I was like, whoa, this is. And I'm thinking back to that situation on the beach.
I could have used this, that, and
Yeah,
that.
this is what I needed back in '65. So, I was blown away. We're sitting down at his desk, and he's literally taking the old cards from the students at the garage, and he's transferring them to these new cool blue cards he's going to put in a Rolodex for the academy. And he has a whole bunch of cards on the table. And his card number one, I literally became student number one. It was just a freak because he hadn't done any but his old students.
That is
Even though you
funny.
weren't the first student, technically,
Not-
just on paper, you were like, oh, number one.
Exactly.
He was the first one at the
and
new academy.
Horian still teases me about that. He said, you were the first student. I said, let's remind people of that.
You should be a black belt by now.
Yeah.
Did he tell you that too?
By the way, the old man, though, and I talk about the old man in the book, is this legal?
Helio.
Elio Gracie. He's from another. He was a like a knight, like a throwback to another era. You're talking about a guy who didn't really fit in the modern world. He was something from another world. And at one point, I finally said to Horian, because I didn't speak any Portuguese, obrigado,
Right.
de nada, and the old man didn't speak any English. But at one point, I said to Horian, what does the old man think of me? This was after I started to do some business with Horian and things were cooking. He said, the old man says that the only thing Arturo Davie knows about jiu-jitsu is how to make money with it.
I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, as I said in the book,
Brazilians,
George,
that's a skill.
I said in the book I wasn't really sure at the time. But the true story is that I met Horian, literally in the summer of 1990. But it's the fall of 1992 that I finally get him to agree to do the World's Best Fighter.
Right.
He wanted to do the Gracie Challenge, and I said that's like getting two of those guys together and they don't agree. And in fact, he and Benny Urquidez had been round and around about it at the Jet. Benny the Jet Urquidez, great kickboxer, by the way.
Right.
You look him up, got a great credentials. And they would argue about what kind of surface was it going to be on, would Horian wear the gi, all of that business. And Horian, of course, in the article that Pat Jordan did, Daria, was $100,000 challenge. You put up 100, I put up 100, whoever wins takes the 100. And the other guy goes, well, nobody did about 100,000 in the gym.
Yeah. I was reading this in the book, and it was so funny. It was like, I asked him, I'm like, oh, so you're going to put $100,000 up there? And he said, no, there's no money.
Yeah, there's no money.
It's like, what?
Well, the true story was the early bouts that I saw in the back room of the Gracie Academy, which was so cool. The first one I ever see, John Milius is standing next to me, the film director and
Right.
screenwriter. And I don't know who he is, but I kind of sort of recognized him. And he and I are watching the same thing. We're watching some kid come in from Compton in a black gi, young fella, with his posse, came in, rolled with Hoyler, got taken down, got choked out, and said, I don't believe it. I got to do it again. I can't imagine this happening to me. I didn't get a chance to use my kaboomer. Hold on a second. I'm coming back. And he got choked out again. So, you watch 2 or 3 of these things, and you realize these guys are into something, but it took me literally more than 2 years to convince Horian to do this. He and Urquidez, finally, Urquidez said, if you win, you can have all my belts. And Horian said, what am I going to do with your belts?
What do I want your belt?
What do I want your belts for? So these things always died. So as I tell the story in the book, I got turned down by HBO, by Showtime, by ESPN.
That's pretty cool because in the book you have a picture of the actual letters at ESPN and Prime Ticket. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Saying,
yeah.
no, we're not interested.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And look at it now. I just can't believe
Yeah.
the struggles you dealt with UFC 1 and looking at the company today. Obviously, there's been changes in it, and of course, other people have taken it over. But you started what we now are working for, what we now all see on this pay-per-view. Showtime turned you down. HBO turned you down. So the struggles with that. What is your first thought after that show ended, that first UFC show? What was your initial thought? Were you happy with the results? Because you said there wasn't that many people in person physically, but you were awaiting the pay-per-view results.
Well, we actually had about 4,000 people, counting the comps.
Right.
And Barry Fay, the great rock father, the legendary rock promoter,
Right.
who brought the Beatles to Colorado, among other things, was our local promoter. And Zane Bresloff, who worked for the WWE, was my local promoter there as well. Zane has passed on, but he was Vince McMahon's guy in the Mountain States. Their campaign for what we were doing made our pay-per-view campaign look like nothing, because they were talking about death and blood and Christians and lions. It was rough. So the fact of the matter is that we were waiting for the pay-per-view results on Tuesday morning, which we would have gotten.
Right.
Although that Dave Meltzer at the Wrestling Observer had them late Monday afternoon, and literally when I got the numbers, I said, "How does Meltzer get these things before we do?" Dave's amazing.
Yeah.
But
And that's why you guys should subscribe to WrestlingObserver.com, print or online.
Is that the
That's the thing.
30 million page thing that you read every week?
Yeah, 24, but with the 8-point font and all.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're plugging everything here, guys. We are the fountain of information. The books, the Fight Pass, the newsletter.
You know, Jay, you're kind of like the guy with the raincoat, and you open it up, and he's got the Rolexes, the Concord. You know, what else you got? What else you
Which
need?
reminds me, my watch is fake, by the way. I'm not wearing it right now, but
Better that than the guy with the raincoat with there and nothing else inside.
Yes,
huh?
thank you. But to answer your
Yeah.
question, we knew that we actually went and took over a sports bar at the arena, at the McNichols Arena, Friday night. And I remember walking around with a Cuban cigar and a big beaker full of single malt scotch, and running into Campbell McLaren and from 7-4 Entertainment, our TV partner, and we looked at each other and we said, "This thing is going to be huge."
So you knew. You had that gut feeling that
We
it
knew.
was.
As I point out in the book, it was a crazy wild time because, doing the first one, we were inventing this stuff along the way.
Literally, yeah.
Literally. There were some surprises, Art Jimmerson being one of them.
Yeah.
But, I knew from the intrinsic excitement that was in the arena, and I knew from our TV production people who had been covering Bruce Springsteen, among other things, and riots, and
All
these
kinds of
people-
exciting
all kinds of
events.
exciting events.
Right.
They were open mouthed. They were stunned by what they were seeing, and I knew that we had a huge hit. The after fight party, the mass ball on Saturday night, and I talk about that in the book. It's the last chapter, and I actually picked up the epigraph for that particular chapter, a little quote to kind of summarize that chapter, and it's "An honor shared is not diminished," because all of those guys felt like winners in a way. They all knew they had been through something extraordinary. They all knew that they had survived. Some felt gratified with the results. There were 3 unhappy souls
Right.
that were at that party,
Yeah, of course.
and I can tell you who they were.
You talk
But-
about that in the book.
Okay, yeah, and but we knew that night it was huge. I walked around on an adrenaline high for a couple of days. We knew we were actually going to be huge. At one point, Michael Pilat said to me, "Well, we're gonna tear down and throw away the Octagon." I said, "What? We're gonna do what?" He said, "Yeah, it's a set." He said, "We'll rebuild it if we need it." I said, "We're coming back to Denver." I said, "I've got a rental place." I said, "Tell your grips to pack it." It was $28,000. We saved it.
Jesus.
Wow.
Pilat was ready to tear it
Where
down.
is that? Is that still exist today?
Well, that's a good question. When I sat down and had a drink with Lorenzo Fertitta at the 20th anniversary show last November as his guest, and we got talking about a couple of things, and Lorenzo said to me, he said, "When I bought the darn thing," he said, "everything had been hocked. Bob Meyerowitz, who we sold to at Semaphore, had sold everything, apparently.
Oh, wow.
All the IP was, somebody else
Really?
owned it, really. And I think Lorenzo intimated to me they had to buy a lot of it back, like, various video tapes. And
The
so forth.
original footage
Yes,
and so on and so
exactly.
on. Yeah.
Exactly. He said, "You know what I bought?" He said, "I bought 3 letters. UFC. So that's what I bought."
Wow.
And he said, on that basis, he said, I knew I had the right franchise.
Right.
And, they put a lot of time and money into it, and you've seen the results. To get the deal they got with Fox, if nothing else, it was a signal to all the hardcore fans who stuck with us through the ban, through the pressure from the politicians and the media, that this thing had entered the mainstream finally.
A few weeks ago, we were talking about, is there too many UFC shows? Just the fact that we were talking about too many UFC shows, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, that just says it all.
That's a very valid point.
It is a
Yeah.
good point. You have to read the book. There's so much that Art talks about in here that he's generously going over right now as much
Yeah.
as he can, but it's not enough to fit in an hour, too much to fit in an hour. So you need to read it, especially the first couple chapters that touch on the real struggles that went into creating this UFC that we now see today. I really, really inspire you guys to go read that.
You know, the thing that was most resonant for me when I first read the book was that in going through the struggles, we've talked about this a bit, Art, in going through the struggles of bringing up the U of MMA, you know, my show with Turi Aldavilla, there were so many parallels to what you went through, be it matchmaking stuff. I would see things, whether it's a fighter that turns down a fight that he should take, or vice versa, you know, or equipment malfunctions or missing equipment. Yeah, I've dealt with that. I know exactly what that's about, you know, or business decisions and challenges that Turi has faced. I know I can pinpoint those in our history as well. And so the thing that's really interesting is that the book has a timeless element to it. It's one part history for MMA buffs, and it reads so fast and breezy and fun. It's fun to read those pages again and relive them. But there's also a story about going into the unknown, having some kind of faith in what you're building up here, and going, I know this makes sense to me. It's going to make sense to a lot of other people, and they're going to buy a ticket. But not knowing exactly what it is you're building there, you know, and that applies to life in general, you know, the challenges of life and going out on your own, pioneering into something that's a challenge for you. But, you know, there's that as well. So
there's definitely a sub story, like you're saying, about Art Davie as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as a guy who moved from, you know, Brooklyn, New York to the West Coast, something I can relate to, and ventured out on his own and tried to make things happen, working for advertising, whether he's successful in that, and trying to pioneer his own thing. You're courageous in yourself and what you did. So for that, I appreciate you. Not only the UFC, but the journey you went through.
Thank you.
And dealing with the Gracies. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Obviously, the Gracie family has put a mark on MMA and jiu-jitsu in America, in Brazil. Coming from Brazil to America. There's people that I respect as a martial artist, and I'm sure these two guys do as well. You were very friendly, most friendly with Rorion Gracie. Obviously, he was part in helping
Yes.
Do the UFC 1.
Yes.
When you began training jiu-jitsu, did you ever want to be a martial artist? Was that ever a thing for you? Because you were a boxer back in the day.
Yeah.
Did you ever want to pursue that route, or was it strictly business and friendship with them?
You know, I knew it was going to do me a world of good to be able to roll and learn some of the grappling. I was smart enough to know that I'm not a black belt in something other than business and promotion and marketing.
Right.
So I thought it was really valuable for me to get that blue belt. And I talk in the book about Royler Gracie broke my ribs twice in getting that blue belt. So, you know, I was already 44 years old at the time.
Are you still a blue belt?
I still am a blue belt. Yes, I'm still a blue belt. But you know, it was really good for me to take that step, because later on it helped me understand some of the people that I was booking, some of the people I was matchmaking.
That's true, as a matchmaker.
It was an enormous asset. I knew enough about striking. I had taken at Vineland in Van Owen in North Hollywood Muay Thai lessons back in the day. So
That's still where they're at.
and they're still there.
I drive by there all the time.
Right, they're still there.
What gym is it?
It's like if you go down Van Owen.
It's MTA,
MTA.
I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah. So, you know, I had enough of that experience, and it was really valuable then for me to have that. The Gracies were an extraordinary family. I thought Rickson Gracie, the family champion, was going to be the obvious Gracie Jiu-Jitsu representative. And then, you know, that summer, finally, Rorion announced to me that it was going to be Royce. And I said, what? Royce Gracie? He said, he babysits your kids. You know,
He's the baby of the bunch,
He was the baby
right?
of the family. He was like 26, in my opinion. He was like 26 going on 17. He's just a big kid. And he said, no, it's going to be Royce. He said, for various reasons, we're not putting Rickson in. There'd been some family issues between Rickson and yet when it came time for Royce to have a trainer for UFC 1, it was Rickson who stepped up out of his love for Royce, not necessarily out of the smooth brotherly relationship he had with Rorion, but he stepped up and gave a tremendous amount of coaching and training. I never saw Royce throw a leg jab in the gym, and you see him do it in UFC 1 right away. That's Rickson Gracie.
That had to be a secret tactic they were working on.
To back up a boxer, especially, or a kickboxer, but definitely a
Right.
boxer.
Yeah.
And I was still doing the matches. I was still figuring it out the night before the fight. I talk about that in the book, that I was still at the last minute. I just didn't want my two best grapplers to face each other at the end. So I put Royce and I put Shamrock on that same wing of the tournament. But it was a formula that I had come up with and actually adhered to for quite a while. McCarthy still teases me about it. It was 3 sharks and 5 goldfish in the tournament.
Right.
And it was always a question of really who were the sharks, because guys could surprise you. To some extent, I thought Taylor Tooley might have been a shark, but it didn't quite work out that way.
Within like a minute, you're like, oh, he's gonna be a goldfish.
He's a goldfish.
Oh, and there goes his tooth right there.
That's one of the most famous video clips from
Yes.
from the first one.
The
That
first fight ever.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah,
and
that kick
quite,
to the
it
face.
really set the whole tone. People, if I had a dime for every person who tells me that they watched the first UFC,
Right.
Or that they were actually there, I'd be a very rich
Very
man
rich.
today. But the truth of the matter is that Taylor Tooley, who now is on that CBS show,
Hawaii 5-0,
5-0,
right? Yeah.
and is a great guy, by the way. I talk to him every couple of months. And he actually saved the event for me because Horian and I lost control of the fighters meeting. It was a disaster. Supposed to be no rules, and there got to be some issues about where you were going to wrap the knuckles, and suddenly Zane Fraser, the kickboxer, and Art Jimison, the boxer, and it becomes chaos. And at one point, I saw Rickson Gracie stand up, and I said, this is either going to be very bad or very good.
Oh,
I don't know
God.
what's going to happen next, because it looked like we were moving towards maybe a brawl. And it was that. There's actually a picture of me in the book.
This is the rules meeting before the event itself. Huh?
Yeah,
The
this
day
is
before.
This is Thursday. This is
Wow.
Thursday
At the
night.
hotel in
At the
Denver,
hotel,
Colorado, in this smaller, right, kind of meeting room.
It was a small ballroom, and
Right.
the fighters were all scrunched in there. And I had the Gracies on one side, I had Taylor Tooley in the back, and I had Jimison, and I had Zane Fraser right up front. And Fraser is a very smart guy. I used to call him a jailhouse lawyer. He was the kind of guy he'd bring up all kinds of issues, and Art, you're not considering this, and he turned the meeting into chaos. The guy who saved it was Taylor Tooley. He picked up the release that had the rules on it. He signed it. He slammed it down on the table. And the whole room got quiet, and he said, "I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I came here to party. Whoever wants to party, I'll see you tomorrow night."
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is so epic.
That was it. It was fine after that. Also, there's a great situation in the book that I did not witness, but Todd Hester from Gladiator magazine did, about Royce kind of losing his composure during the dress rehearsal on Friday, about 2 or 3 hours before the show.
What do you think that was? You talk about it a little bit in the book. Royce breaks down crying right after that moment.
Yeah.
Before, what do you think that was getting
You
to
know,
him?
what's very interesting is that I saw very little of Royce that week. They had him virtually in seclusion. Horian had rented another hotel room, and they brought mats up from L.A. and they were doing private grappling and training. Nobody could see it. In fact, they didn't want me in the room. The night of the event, in the dressing rooms, Horian had paid for himself out of his own pocket to have an extra monitor. There was a general monitor for all the fighters, but Royce had his own monitor, and there was a phalanx of Brazilians guarding him like he was the Pope, and they were all the cardinals. I got to the door and knocked on it, and they said, "Arturo, you can't come in." I said, "What do you mean?"
What do you mean?
What do
It's
you
me.
mean? It's me. It's me. No, Arturo, this was a Brazilian thing at this point. Yeah, I wasn't coming in. So I did not see Royce much. Rickson had him totally trained and focused. I think that the train was as much of a screening tool and device as anything else to keep Royce totally on track. So I was very impressed by that, by the way. And when you don't see Rickson Gracie in UFC 3 and Royce is on his own, then you see Royce running out of gas emotionally and physically.
Wow. So you think
So-
there's something to say there?
Oh, I got to tell you, it was, in my humble opinion, and maybe others might disagree, I think Rickson's spine was in Royce's back. And to answer your question, I think he was under tremendous pressure, exposing the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu art to the world. His father is there, the patriarch of the family,
Yeah.
the Golden Eagle himself. He's 26 going on 17. It was all on his shoulders. And I think the pressure at one point. And who was it in the octagon? who is embracing him and holding him and talking in his ear?
Hickson.
It's Hickson.
Wow.
Who was supposed to be the guy to begin with.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so sad we have to wrap up
Yeah,
soon.
real
but
quick,
let's
though.
do some rapid fire questions,
Yeah.
just quick answers.
What do you think about the UFC today as it is?
I think it's excellent today. I think it's extraordinary. I like what they've done. I attended the 20th anniversary show. They're on the right track. These guys really know what they're doing.
I mean, did you envision just at that point? I mean, now they're with Fox, and I mean, did you ever just think of how it would blow up, how it is now?
John Milius used to say to me, John was the director,
Yeah.
we were to be our creative director. He used to say 20 years from today, 50 million people will be watching this on a given night, crowning some champion. So whether it's 20 or 40 years that happens, he was saying that you what you're doing is you're finding the real Mr. Universe, the real Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, but it's funny because even in the beginning, you mentioned how you wanted the show, or initially it was going to be in Brazil. Now it's like Brazil, China,
15
New
times
Zealand,
in the UK.
Australia. You know.
Yes.
That is so awesome.
Exactly.
Do you ever think it'll be an Olympic sport of its own?
You know, it could, but obviously that's a very complicated road to take.
Right.
And a number of things would have to happen. Even John McCarthy was saying to me the other night that he would love to see a standardization of all the MMA rules and all the sanctioning bodies in all 49 states in this
Right.
country. And that isn't there. So I think that there's quite a long road, and you know how complicated it can be to get a new sport adopted into the
From
Olympics.
reading your book, I do. I read how you did it, and it seemed very hard. So I can imagine it'll take another 20, 30 years. But in our future, we might see MMA in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Knock on
that.
wood.
Maybe not.
wherever there's some wood.
Maybe not a question. More of like a comment. Please, can you write a follow-up book?
You know, George, I have a funny feeling if this book continues to be the success that it appears to be initially, that I will probably be the publisher, and others will say to me, you should write the sequel. I did 18 UFCs. All the way up to UFC Japan in December of 1998.
Okay.
I've got a lot more stories and a lot more skeletons in the closet.
Oh, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 with just Art Davie. But for now, we have to
Sounds
wrap it
good.
up, guys. Jay Tan, George Hermosa, Art Davie, get in your plugs. Go ahead.
G-Tan.
This is the only thing really to talk about right here is
I agree.
Is this legal? Again, available online, Amazon.com, AscendBooks.com, Barnes & Noble stores, and the website. And and by the way, August 24th, Club Nokia, University of MMA, Fight Night 8. Tie it back to Art Davie. He will be there. We will be selling books. You can meet the man himself, shake his hand, thank you, and have him sign. He'll be there for that.
Me too. Everything that he said. Yeah. Buy the book.
Ditto.
Same.
Yeah.
Ditto.
We will
Ditto.
all be there. The AfterBuzz crew will be there August 24th at U of MMA.
Cool.
So please watch it. I'm excited. Hopefully we could sit next to each other.
I would like that, Davie.
That would be awesome.
That'd be a pleasure.
And we could talk. We could say, "Ooh, was that a rear naked choke from the 90s, or is it a modern rear naked choke?" Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. My name's Daria Baronato. You can check me out at DariaRay.com, and I will soon be fighting for U of MMA with
What?
Jay Tan. I don't know when yet, but soon. Art Davie, thank you so much. Where can we find you? On Twitter, Facebook?
I'm on Art Davie on Twitter.
Everything?
I'm on Facebook. And we have a companion website to the book,
right.
isthislegalthebook.com.
Easy enough. Isthislegalthebook.com. Guys, we will be back August 16th. We have a little bit of a break here because of, some injuries going on in the UFC, but we will be back August 16th with an awesome card. Bader
We'll miss you.
versus St. Bruce. Thank you.
OSP, yep.
It's exciting.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later!
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Thank you for watching AfterBuzz TV on YouTube. For more of your favorite after shows and interviews, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion on the episode in the comment section below here. We'd love to see what you guys are buzzing about. Thanks again. Buzz you later.